Oh, God. Wow, I mean, I have to follow that. You understand? Like, I'm watching I've been working with these people for years, and now I have to come up and, like, follow that. Oh, man, that's rough. That's rough. Never, it's so beautiful to see all of my colleagues be able to articulate their ideas about education and about what it is that they're doing here and what we've been trying to do here over this time. And I'm going to try to do the same thing. There, by the grace of God, go I. Imagine a young woman. Imagine a young African woman. Her head is shaved tight so that the tight curls illustrate the curve of her skull. And she wears a white-collared shirt and a gray skirt that's just common to so many of the African schools. Imagine her standing on a desk. Her long Tutsi arms are folded over her chest for protection, and she's standing on the very edge of the desk, and her eyes are closed. And at the count of 10, she's going to fall off backwards into empty space. She's afraid, and she knows real fear. 7 years earlier, her mother and her father, almost everyone in her village, along with over 1 million other people in Rwanda, were killed in the civil war that devolved into a genocide. And she's starting to cry. And I can hear her from my hiding place outside the classroom with its clay floor with the rest of the students. And so I call out to her, "Veux-tu arrêter? Do you want to stop?" And there's a pause, and she says, "Non, je veux le faire. I want to do it." So she counts to 10, and we all quietly sneak back in, and we put our arms out on either side. And she falls off the table and into our arms. Immediately, she explodes into tears. She starts crying, sobbing, heaving sobs. And we put her carefully down on the floor, and we all just stand there. We all just stand there, being present, looking into her eyes, our hearts open, supporting her in this moment of process. Wow. That was one of the most beautiful moments of my life, but it was followed by a kind of like an existential crisis that I had that morning, where I was asking myself, what am I doing here? We're in Rwanda. We're working with Hutu students, with Tutsi students on each side of the Civil War, together at the National University of Butare. And I just had to have that moment where you ask yourself, like, is everything that I believe in and my entire career, like, totally full of crap? Is this just totally worthless? But, art is not medicine, and it's not an extended therapy session. It's not a life jacket. It's not a life vest. It's not shelter. What is it, and what value does it have, really? But the more I thought about it, the more I had to kind of really come to the conclusion that what art gives is something that nothing else can provide. You are not going to manifest a moment where people are communicating and people are sharing their emotions, where people are improvising movement and they're building trust in a safe space that's been created in a calculus class. Sorry, Kyle. It's just not where it happens. That's not how it happens. And so I kind of came up with the idea of, actually, this is worth something. This is valuable. Because what art provides, art is a conduit for the imagination. And the imagination is what fuels our lives. The imagination is what fuels our future. There's another example when I was traveling with a bunch of our students here from Green School 20 years later. And now we're on the bio buses that Kyle told you about, fueled on used cooking oil, and we are traveling through the backwaters of Java, right? Performing the Ramayana and going into schools, and our students are teaching actually these workshops themselves. And, I said to my students, under my tutelage, you will play in the finest parking lots in Java. No holds barred. Sky's the limit. And as we traveled, we were in Bromo. There was one teacher I remember as the students were teaching, and he was off to the side, and he was a very stern teacher. This kind with the small mustache and the high shoulders. And he was, he didn't like that this was happening. He didn't have time to teach his curriculum. This was messing up his entire schedule. And I feel for him because when teachers are beholden to a curriculum and a schedule that they have to deliver by so-and-so time, that children have these test scores, it creates a lot of stress. So I sympathize. But what I noticed was that during the day, he began to relax. He began to see that there was something valuable happening. He began to see this exchange between our students and his students as they were playing back and forth, sharing ideas, sharing language, sharing imagination. And that, I think, is just so absolutely fabulous. I have dedicated my entire life to the imagination, principally to theater and poetry, which means I have also dedicated my life to obscurity and poverty. The only thing, one more thing that's worthless that you could do, which is teach. The trifecta, right? The trifecta. Got it all. It's been a rough year, huh? Yeah. It's been one hell of a year. It's been like 17 years packed into 1 year. And I have the bald spot and the wrinkles to prove it. And, while we've all had our lives brought to their knees and everything that we knew before has suddenly ground to this screeching halt, we've all had a lot of time to think about the way we are living and about the way that we leave our families every day to go into the subway, to come out of the subway, to go up to an office, to sit there for 10 hours, to go back down into the subway, to go to our families. God. Or trudge off to the factory for a nice 10-hour slog. And all of a sudden, we've had this moment to kind of question, what are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? What's going on? Is this the best we got? We can't imagine a better way for our entire world to operate? No, we can, actually. We can imagine a better way, and we have been. We've been sitting at home imagining a better way. We've been coming. I'm sure you have plans at home right now. You have like journals full of notes and diagrams. Me too. Him too. Her too. And when I look at that, I kind of look at the last 300 years of education. And I kind of ask myself, how are we educating? My colleagues, my dear friends, they've already shared so many of their ideas. And, we share the same value system with the way that we are thinking about learning and the way that learning creates change. And when I think about 300 years of education, and I think about the way that the environment has been destroyed and the way that we live in a way which is inequitable between cultures and languages and hemispheres and races, when I think about all of this, we often say that the world's problems are born of ignorance, but, from my perspective, the world's problems have actually been created by the most highly intelligent and highly educated people of the last 300 years. And this is the result of all of our capital L learning, right? Yeah. You see? And so when I think about the way that I want to learn myself, and when I think about the way that I'm educating, I start to consider what is the role of imagination in education. Not what role should it have, but what role does it have right now? And how much do we value it? And how much space do we give for it? I'll give you an example. When I took that trip to Java with my students, they missed 7 scheduled days of classes. 7 days. Later, we took another group of students. We traveled for 21 days through India. 21 days. That's how much class they missed. To go to India, to work in South India, to learn reforestry and conservation, living off the grid with no frills whatsoever, and then going and working inside of a group home with kids who are living with HIV and doing cultural exchange, doing arts exchange with them. They missed 21 days of classes. Do you know what a mess that made to all of the lesson plans that their teachers had created and how much they had to struggle to catch up when they came back? Not at all. They didn't have to do that at all. Nothing. Not at all, because the other teachers that I work with, who you know and who you love, they all took into account that this was an important form of learning and that it could only happen in this way, in this fashion, and they made a space for it in the way that they assess those students, and they made a space for it in the school itself in the way that we teach. And so when they're talking to you about, like, this can't happen alone, there are lone renegade teachers in Aceh and also in England and also in Des Moines, and they are doing all kinds of amazing things because they have this imaginative, creative genius. But they can't do it alone. They can't do it alone. They need to have a community around them that supports those kind of ideas. And when I look at this community, and I think of the last 6 years that I have been here, and I think what I have taken from here. So let's say, Sal, I have these scissors. I'm returning them now. I'm just going to put them right there. Also have, so I just clean conscious, okay? Clean conscious. What I take, besides those scissors, which I'm not taking, actually, I've left those there. That's clear. You saw it. It happened. Okay, thanks. Witnesses all. What I'm really going to take away is the inspiration from my colleagues that you already know. Director of the high school, Kyle King. Director of curriculum, Emily Ferguson. They teach a class together called Flatland, where they're mixing literacy and mathematics together in one class. That is bringing imagination into the classroom. That is reimagining how we teach. Because single subjects, like if you ask me, I mean, I teach history, social studies, I teach philosophy, psychology, I teach filmmaking, I teach photography, I teach acting, I teach theater, right? And if you ask me, like, should we just eliminate those subjects? Yes, I really just take them, open a blender, drop them in, press the blender, take what you have in the blender, just walk out and just pour it right out into the grass, because that is so old school. That's just an old way of thinking about the entire world. And we can imagine a better world. We can imagine a better way to teach. So what does it look like if you do that? What does it look like if you just eliminate subjects? Well, I think it looks like Flatland. I think it looks like my colleague Tom South teaching history, the history of the 1960s, but he's not doing it only from books, right? He's doing it from books, but he's also, when he looks at the American War in Vietnam and the Civil Rights Movement in the United States, he's also using the music of that time, the music that shaped that decade, to teach those ideas. Imagine that you could, like, learn history through music. Hey, that's higher level thinking. That is imagination. Yes, yes, yes. You can say that. Or I think of my colleagues Ibu Rahayu or Ibu Puri, Ibu Stephanie Douglas, and they are teaching science. They're teaching science, botany, evolution, but they're also using drawing and painting. So the students are looking at form and structure of plants. They are bringing with them creative intelligence into the process of learning science and math. And that is a quality of thought. Imagination is a quality of thought. It's one that we have to call on if we are going to change the old and persistent problems of the past and transform the future that our children deserve and demand. Under their inspiration, I have tried to pull the skills that I have to teach multidisciplinary classes as well. And so I had one class working on abnormal psychology called I'm Not Crazy, all caps. And we're all looking at, what are these mental illnesses, but not only in the DSM-5, but also through poetry and through art. So that when we look at chronic depression in the poetry of Sylvia Plath or Anne Sexton, we have a new way of understanding what this means. So that we're not learning only with the head, but with us in that learning, we're bringing the heart. And we're bringing a sense of humanity that really is mental illness. Mental illness is not just some diagnosis, it is someone in your family, or it is something you yourself have struggled with. And that's real. That changes everything. It changes the quality of thought that those students are learning with. And so how do you then assess that? Well, I had one student, he's from New York. He had grown up always in private schools, always with those subjects coming in the neat little packages, right? Even though we know life does not come in neat packages, that our family spills into our work spills into our family, the day spills into the night, all of the seasons move forward with one beautiful sweeping arc. But he had grown up with the boxes, and the boxes were the way that his mind was formed and trained. And so when he was in this class, I'm Not Crazy, he really wanted to study. Type 2 schizophrenia. I said, for all of my classes, students have to write a proposal. The proposal is a separate line of study that is of their own devising, that they are going to go forward, that they give me a list of deliverables, what the project proposal is, just like a job, just like real life. And they submit that to me, we work together, and then they create what they want to study themselves on the sidelines of what it is that we're learning in the class, those dominant themes. And when I said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I don't know what to do. He said, I don't have any kind of practice. I don't paint, I don't draw, I don't write, I don't dance. I said, well, okay, if I gave you the whole weekend, what would you do? He said, I would just play video games. I said, okay, great, let's start there. Video games are an entire universe, right? So many designers, so many artists, songwriters, story writers, they all come together to create these universes. And so I said, do that. What he did is he went away and he created a 25-page industry standard pitch for a video game that teaches about paranoid schizophrenia in a first-hand POV throughout the game as the illness progresses and what happens to the family and with the doctors and with life and perspective. That's brilliant. I don't need to sit that kid down and give him a fill-in-the-blank test to know that he learned something. We have to bring our imagination to the process itself of assessment. But how does that happen with teachers? How does that happen that teachers across the board are going to be able to collaborate with one another, that they're going to be able to work together the way my colleagues do, or that they're going to be able to mix those multiple disciplines in their classes by creating their own practice of imagination, their own practice of art and creativity and self-expression. So if you are a teacher, if you're not a teacher, just you as humans, if you don't write, if you don't paint, if you don't take any time to try to harness the power of the imagination. My friend, the artist Paradox Pollock, he said, the imagination is the infinite inside the finite. When we touch the infinite, that power that has no boundary, when we harness it in our own life, only good things can happen. Only good things, only growth. More growth and a faster growth than we have ever experienced in our lives. And so I want to say to you, harness the power of your own imagination. Begin a practice. If you're an administrator of a school, give time in your PD for things besides the dry, old way of doing things. Reimagine the way you're training your teachers. Give them time to collaborate and cross-pollinate. Give them permission and money to take a dance class. They will take that dance class and they will bring it into the classroom. And maybe they will fail. Give them a place to fail. We tell our children that failure is one of the steps to success. It's not the opposite of success. We have to model that ourselves. If we model that, they will believe us when we say it. Right? Yeah. We can imagine a better way. We can imagine a better way of living. We can imagine a better way of working. We can imagine a better way of educating. If we want to, we can imagine that I actually have slides and that there's one with a chicken right there. A white chicken with bookshelves. Just there it is, imagine. And we can also imagine that for that young woman falling off a desk, taking a leap of faith, a leap of trust, if we can imagine a better world for her, and if we can imagine her taking those tools and doing something good for her country, if all of that, imagine we can, then I just tell you right now, then imagine we must. Thank you.